Think of a classic play. Your mind might drift back to grade school. Maybe you watch an adaptation of Romeo and Juliet. Perhaps your class went to a local theater and were mesmerized by the chorus of Antigone. These are plays that, for various reasons, have survived the world theater canon. But what about plays written in America? What challenges have they faced? How have they survived? Or perhaps, how have they been resurrected? I have identified a triple gauntlet of challenges in American theater: government, social, and market censorship. So the question I pose is, how have American plays faced the gauntlet of government, social, and market censorship to survive, or to be resurrected, in the American theater canon? My name is Jamie Miskimen, and this is my final project for Theater History 2. To understand this gauntlet, I've chosen 3 landmark productions that epitomize these challenges. First, the government gauntlet. We look at The Cradle Will Rock, a play the United States government feared so much during a time of national turmoil that they manufactured a financial excuse just to silence it. Second, the social gauntlet. We examine God of Vengeance, a play that flourished for decades in Yiddish, but the moment it was performed in English, it sparked a social uproar that led to the entire cast being arrested for indecency. And third, the market gauntlet. We look at one of the most notable plays in American history, A Raisin in the Sun. Despite its brilliance, it was deemed a commercial risk and forced to rely on grassroots crowdsourcing just to reach the stage. Let's go back to May 30th, 1937, Memorial Day, a day for celebration that turned into a massacre. On May 30th, 1937, Chicago, police killed 10 unarmed strikers and injured 90 more in the Memorial Day massacre. The strike was against companies like Republic Steel, who refused to sign contracts for standard pay and 8-hour workdays. To the east in New York City, a group of actors were preparing a show funded by the Federal Theater Project. Established in 1935 as part of the Works Progress Administration to provide economic relief to theater professionals during the Great Depression. This new show, entitled The Cradle Will Rock, was set in Steeltown, USA, and focused on the uprising of the working class. It's no surprise that 10 days after the Memorial Day massacre, the Federal Theater Project suddenly cut its New York budget.
Newsflash, 20% cuts in personnel. It's curtains for us, all of us. I hear a rumor they're going to shut this whole project down.
On June 16th, opening night of The Cradle Will Rock, armed guards locked the door of the Maxine Elliott Theater. Actors Equity head Frank Gilmore informed the cast that actors appearing on any other stage while on the WPA payroll might be considered employed and could possibly lose their jobs. Between the actors' union threats and the physical blockade, it would seem that the show should have died that day. However, director Orson Welles and producer John Houseman led the cast and audience on a 21-block march to the Venice Theater.
Federal government and the Actors and Musicians Union have collectively forbidden us from performing this play.
What's happening?
However,
Shut down the
I'm
show.
happy to announce that Mark Blitzstein, the composer of Cradle Will Rock, not being a member of the union, will be performing the play by himself on the stage of the Venice Theatre, 21 blocks north, on 59th and 7th. Of course, you're all invited to join us. Thank you.
Director Orson Welles appealed to the actors' rights as individuals and told them, you may not appear on stage, but there is nothing to prevent you from buying your way into whatever theater we find. And then why not get up from your seats as first-class American citizens? Speak your piece when your cue comes. Producer John Houseman told the cast, no one can prevent your sitting in the audience, and only I could stop you from standing up at your seats to sing an occasional song. Composer Mark Blitzstein accompanied the impromptu, unorchestrated performance on piano, with actors singing from the house seats. The show survived that night, and by July 1st, the production went on a national tour, surviving the gauntlet of government censorship. But what happens when the gauntlet isn't just a government padlock, but the moral weight of society itself? If The Cradle Will Rock is a story of survival through defiance of government censorship, Shalom Ash's God of Vengeance is a story of a play that was buried alive by social censorship. God of Vengeance played successfully in Europe and Yiddish theaters for 15 years without incident. Then, in February of 1923, New York, after the opening Broadway debut, the entire cast and producer, Harry Weinberger, were indicted and arrested on charges of staging an obscene and impure drama. The trigger? The English language. The judge was explicit. He told the jury that even if the play was a classic in Yiddish, those labels did not transfer to Broadway. He asserted that the atmosphere of the Yiddish theater could not excuse what he viewed as a violation of New York's decency laws. Though Weinberger eventually won an appeal in 1924, the damage was done. Between the expensive trial, the loss of momentum, and the crushing social stigma, God of Vengeance lay dead for almost a century. That is, until Paula Vogel and Rebecca Teichman resurrected it with the play Indecent. Paula Vogel first read God of Vengeance in the 1970s. She was stunned by the sensitive portrayal of lesbian romance and his critique of patriarchal hypocrisy. Decades later, director Rebecca Teichman discovered the 1923 trial transcripts leading to a thesis production titled The People vs. the God of Vengeance. When the two eventually collaborated, they bypassed the traditional hierarchy. They developed the work through a back-and-forth ensemble-driven approach over 7 years. The resulting play, Indecent, celebrates Yiddish culture and explores how society polices female desire and how immigrant communities are pressured to act respectably to avoid backlash. A pivotal scene in both Ash's original play and Vogel's reimagining depicts the two female leads sharing a romantic moment in the rain. By putting the history of the censorship on the stage, Indecent forced the American canon to acknowledge what it had tried to murder. If The Cradle Will Rock survived the gauntlet of government censorship, and God of Vengeance was resurrected from the gauntlet of social censorship, our final case study explores the most persistent gauntlet of all, the markets. In 1959, A Raisin in the Sun had to prove its worth not just to the critics, but to a financial system that didn't believe a story about black people could be profitable. Why would the white producer Philip Rose fight so adamantly to produce this play in the 1950s? Because he was a social rights activist, and more importantly, he was a friend. In 1952, actor William Marshall brought Sidney Poitier to Philip Rose's apartment for a meeting on civil rights. They became close through their activism and social lives, often meeting at Sidney's Harlem restaurant, Ribs in the Rough, for weekly poker games with out-of-work black actors. Philip met Lorraine Hansberry while she was working as a waitress and singer, and a deep friendship formed.
I remember going to a play that was done in the village about a black family with Lorraine. We used to go to the theater a lot to all the off-Broadway things. And she didn't like the play. And she said, well, if I was going to write about that kind of thing, I could write a better play than that. And I said, I was not a producer at that time. We were just friends. I said, well, try it. Maybe something will happen. And about a year and a half later, she showed me what was the first draft of A Raisin in the Sun.
After Lorraine brought the script, A Raisin in the Sun, to Philip, they shared it with Sidney Poitier. Sidney's response was simple. If Philip could raise the money, Sidney would do the play. It took a grueling grassroots approach and over 3 years before Philip could secure the investment. On March 10th, they held a preview night, which turned out to be a flop.
And during the performance, Lorraine and I sat in the back and watched an audience that was rather non-committal, to put it mildly. They didn't know much about the play. They were a preview audience. And Lorraine said to me, well, I guess things are different in other towns. It looks like it's a flop. My press agent at the time took me to a bar next door at the end of the second act and said, this is what we have to do. We have to close it down, and I'll try to get Kazan to come in and take over, and we'll have to do a lot of work on it, because obviously this is not going to work.
Despite the press agent's warnings to delay opening, Philip stayed the course. He simply didn't have the money to make changes. Opening night, however, was a 180-degree turnaround. The audience cheered, demanding that Lorraine Hansberry take the stage to be celebrated. It ran for 530 performances, won the New York Drama Critics Circle Award for Best Play in 1959, was adapted into a major film in 1961, and has been triumphantly revived on Broadway in 2004 and 2014. The history of government censorship attempting to subdue its citizens, the strong but fickle social movements trying to silence voices, and the cold hardships of the marketplace. These have all shaped the American theater canon. But as we've seen, the canon often takes shape in spite of that censorship. The stories I've told in this video are but a glimpse into the full history of these plays, and only a drop in the vast history of the American stage. The voices from these works have survived or been resurrected in spite of the gauntlets they have faced. Now, future voices will have to survive their own gauntlets. I'm Jamie Miskimen, and this is my Theater History 2 final project. Thank you for watching.